All praise, all glory, all honor. It's most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And peace to you in the name of Jesus, brothers and sisters. I just wanted to come to you very briefly on the cusp of New Year's Day and ask the question, should believers observe New Year's Day? What really made me think about it is driving home, after observing the Sabbath and seeing all these churches, and these churches have on their placards there, they have signs outside of their church stating that, hey, come here, celebration starts at 10 p.m. tonight. All right, so this, if you really think about how foolish this is, we're supposed to be celebrating the beginning of the new year in a church. Now, that's one thing for the world to do, but even the church, I guess the churches, these so-called churches, are part of the world too, because God's new year does not start on January 1st. So we're going to look at this thing and see when God's new year begins and where New Year's Day is, as far as the world deals with it, where that comes from. So I just want to start off, before I get there though, I want to start off in Genesis and just show you something here about how God does things. This is Genesis. I'm going to pick it up in chapter 1. And I'm going to pick it up at verse 14. Genesis 1 and 14. So this is in the beginning, in the creation. And it says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So this is how you tell time. Okay. Again, he said, let there be lights in the firmament. What is he like talking about? What you see in that, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And he says, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. When the Lord has a change in time, there is something that you can clearly see. I want to show you this with the day. Okay, so let's pick it up at verse, I'm going to just pick it up at verse 8. So it says here, and God called the firmament heaven and divided, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Okay, so what does that mean? That means, when did the day begin? Did it begin at 12 midnight, that like man says, or does it begin in the evening, where you could see a change? You can see the sun setting, right? That's when it begins. That's when the day begins to the Lord. And if you think about it, brothers and sisters, there's nothing new or no change at 12 p.m. midnight, 12 a.m. midnight. 12 a.m. midnight looks like 1 a.m. midnight, like 2 p.m. midnight, or 2 a.m. midnight, 1 a.m. midnight, 2 a.m. midnight. Wait a minute, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., because midnight is 12 a.m. Or you can go to 9 p.m. They all looks the same. How is that a beginning of the day? But rather, when according to God, you see what? You see a change. You see a change. You see a little changing of the day in the time. And it's the same thing when it comes to God's beginning of his year. Okay? Because you need to ask yourself, what's the beginning in January, in the dead of winter? How is that the beginning of something when everything is dead in nature? Let's go to Exodus 12, because here we can see the beginning of the year. This is Exodus 12. Exodus 12 and verse 1. So it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, okay, so this is the Lord talking to Moses, and he says, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. Perhaps they were dealing in some other time frame. Perhaps they were dealing with the time of the Egyptians. But he tells them, he establishes something else. He says in verse 2, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Okay, so in that first month, brothers and sisters, is when you begin the Lord's feast days. See, the world has done away with the Lord's feast days. You're supposed to be in the church, but you ain't dealing with none of the feast days. You're not even dealing with the Lord's new year, because his new year deals, again, it's around a time of spring, around that time, okay, that we know is spring in this hemisphere. So it says, verse 3, speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month shall ye take to them every man a lamb Okay, so that was they took a lamb on the 10th day, kept it until the 14th day. The first, so what's the 14th day of the first month? At even, you should know it, is the Lord's Passover. So the Lord's Passover, which points to the Messiah as our Passover lamb. That's why John the Baptist saw, behold, the Lamb of God was taken away the sin of the world. That's in the first month. Okay, on that 14th day of the first month, and even is the Lord's Passover. So the first, and what time is the Passover? Again, during the time of March and April. Let's go to Exodus 13. Okay, Exodus 13. And I'm going to pick it up at verse 1. It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, see, Moses, I keep reading this because Moses is not coming up with anything. Right? It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, he's been instructed. Sanctify unto me all the firstborn whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. Okay, so whatever bird comes from first from the womb is for the Lord. Firstborn are set apart. Then it says in verse 3, and Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which he came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. That's what Egypt is, represents the house of bondage. That was the first major captivity of Israel, and there were many after that. We are in captivity even until this day. It says, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. So what did they leave on that next day after the Passover, the feast of unleavened bread? They left bondage, eating unleavened bread. So once you, and spiritually speaking, once you come up under the blood of Christ, now you've been free from bondage, the bondage of death. Now you eat what? Unleavened bread, which is the law, statutes, commandments of God. Let that be in your mouth and let you walk according to that. That's what that points to. Then it says in verse 4, because this is the first month that we just read about it, but here he gives it a name. It says, this day came ye out in the month of Abib. Okay, so what is the month of Abib? Let's look at Zondervan's Pictorial Bible Dictionary and see what it says here. It says, Abib, the pre-exilic name of the first month of the year. Okay, then it says, after the exile, the name was changed to Nisan. It fell about the time of our March in early April. That's why I said during the time of our spring in this hemisphere. Okay, so that's the beginning of the year according to God's calendar. And even when you look, if you want to use Strong's, if you look at Strong's and when you see the word Abib, okay, sometimes they pronounce it with a V, A-V-I-V, or A-B-I-B is how it's pronounced, spelled in English. And number 24, so because if you look at the Hebrew, it's aleph bet yod bet. Abib, it says from an unused root, means to be tender or green. All right, young, it says i.e. or in reality a young ear of grain. Hence the name of the month Abib or Nisan. Abib, ear, green, ears of corn. That's when things are green at this time. See, nothing is new in the dead of winter. That's the complete opposite. Everything, nothing is new. How is that the beginning of something? That's like looking at somebody when they died and said that's their birthday. That's not their birthday. That's the day they died. That's the day they died. So we have to ask ourselves the question: if the Lord's his New Year begins in trying to March and April in the month of what they call Abib, what is January 1st all about? And should we be dealing with it? Right? Because we clearly see that's not biblical. But all these churches are inviting you to come and worship with them on this day. They said, come on, celebration starts at 10 o'clock. And they're gonna stay there and they're gonna listen to some music. They're gonna bring the new year in right, so to speak. But brothers and sisters, this is not the new year. This is not the new year. Let's look at something here. Let's look at, I'm gonna go to the World Book Encyclopedia. I'm gonna go to where it says New Year's Day and see what this and this is really elementary. I mean, this is an encyclopedia. So you can look these things up. See, people talking about Christmas, you can look up Christmas and see it's pagan in an encyclopedia. You don't have to do some in-depth research, or common sense should tell you that, hey, maybe this is pagan with all these evergreen trees and this big fat white man coming down the chimney in a red suit. But this is New Year's Day. This is on page 289 of the World Book Encyclopedia. It says New Year's Day is the first day of the calendar year. But you have to ask yourself, whose calendar? People in almost every country celebrate this day as a holiday. The celebrations are both festive and serious. Many people make New Year's resolutions to break bad habits or to start good ones. Again, bringing the new year in right. But it's not the new year. But you want to bring it in a church, and you want to put God in your mess. You done put God in all this mess, right? The Most High, you done put him in Christmas. You done put him in Easter. You done put him in Sunday worship. You didn't even put him in New Year's Day. But the true and living God, the God of Israel, the Most High, he ain't dealing with this nonsense. And if you are a believer, you true believer, you shouldn't be dealing in it. Okay, so it says something about how they have lived during the past year and look forward to the next 12 months. Early customs. Many ancient people started the year at harvest time. See, some people started it in the harvest time. We look at the pagan calendar. That's the time they start. Like when you look at a lot of the pagan calendars, they would start during the fall. They perform rituals to do away with the past and purify themselves for the new year. Even these false Jews, they would say Rosh Hashanah is the new year. I've heard some say that. That's not the new year. For example, some people in any kind of way, civil or any spiritual, whatever kind of way, it's not the new year because it's not biblical. For example, some people put out the fires they were using and started new ones, like those bonfires. Look up what these people did, these Celtic people did, and these Jewish did during the time of what we call Halloween. And you'll see a lot of this nonsense. All right. Matter of fact, I'm gonna keep reading. I want to go down to where it says the date of the new year. It says during the Middle Ages, most European countries use March 25th, a Christian holiday called Annunciation Day. But again, Christian according to what? According to Roman Catholicism, which is not of God or of the Mashiach or the Messiah or the Christ. It says they use that day to start the year. It says by 1600, many Western nations had adopted a revised calendar called the Gregorian calendar. All right, so this wicked Pope, Pope Gregory, he came up with another calendar to replace the Julian calendar, right? Because that has some problems in it as far as calculation. So that's where they get it from. So this calendar, the one used today, this is what they use today. That's what calendar we on, the Gregorian calendar. Right, so that's why when you're calculating the feast days, you have to take into account the Gregorian calendar, right? Because this is the calendar that this world uses. Even when you put it, you have to say at sundown the new day, right? This is when it get at sundown. This is when the Passover starts, right? Because again, according to man, they don't do it that way. So it said this calendar, the one used today, restored January 1st. As New Year's Day. Okay, Great Britain and its colonies in America adopted the Gregorian calendar in 1752. So in this hemisphere, when these Europeans came over here and raped and pillaged and stole the land, they didn't have New Year's Day as the first day of the year either at first. It wasn't until mid-1700s that was done. Now, I'm going to read this to you. Many people celebrate the New Year on dates established by their religion. For example, the Jewish New Year. There is no such thing as the Jewish New Year. Why do I say that? Because there's no such thing as anything. Listen, I'm going to read what I read earlier again. It said in Exodus 12:1, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the land, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. When you read his feast days in Leviticus 23. What does he say? And the Lord, verse 1, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord. Right? So what they call in Rosh Hashanah is a feast of the Lord. And it's not the New Year. So it says, for example, the Jewish New Year, a solemn occasion called Rosh Hashanah, is observed during September or early October. Then it goes into the Hindus and the Muslims. See, all these people have different New Year, but the true and living God has his New Year in the time of March and April, in the month Abib, and that name you see it another way in Nisan, in another example. Okay, so I want to go up to I want to go back up on the same page to 29 and see the where it came from. Matter of fact, I'll just read it in here. This is the pagan origins of Christian holidays on page 20. It's on page 20. I start on page 20. Okay, it's page 20 here. It says, on the modern Gregorian calendar, January 1st is celebrated as the initial day of the new year because the vast majority of the world has adopted the Gregorian calendar. New Year's Day is considered the only global public holiday. Around the world, this celebration is commemorated by shooting fireworks and rounds of ammunition into the midnight sky. That's what they're going to be doing soon. In a few hours, they're going to be letting them rip, right? Busting in the air, which is dangerous, by the way, but they're going to be doing it nevertheless. January 1st has been incorporated into the Catholic Church as well as the Eastern Orthodox Church. Now, however, celebrating on page 21, however, celebrating this date as the beginning of the new year was established from a pagan perspective, right? This has nothing to do with the Most High God, all right? To find the origin of the pagan holiday, we need but only to look at ancient Rome, okay? So it says in 46, Julius Caesar, with the assistance of the Egyptian astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria, revised the previously used calendar and established the new year in January. However, this particular calendar was quite unsound. For instance, the year 46 BC, often referred to as the year of confusion, had 445 days and 15 months. See, man, it's crazy. See, there's so much for man establishing something where he told you what to establish in the very beginning, right? We see what God established. This shall be the beginning of months to you. But man, when he does something, you get foolishness like 445 days and 15 months in a year. That is some confusion. That's just like the French. They tried to come up, I believe during the time of the French Revolution, they tried to come up with a calendar that had 10 days in it. A week that had, so that week instead of having 7, it had 10, but 7 is what it was established. But nevertheless, it says on February 24th, 582, Pope Gregory introduced, the 13th, I believe, introduced the calendar, which is utilized throughout most of the known world today. So that's the Gregorian calendar that I was talking about. Now, where you get January from? Why was this the beginning of the month? It said the month January was named in honor of Janus, the god of new beginnings, gates, and doors. All right. And early, matter of fact, let me read that in another the World Book Encyclopedia under Janus. This is on page 31. It said Janus or Janus. In Roman mythology was a god who had 2 faces. See, this is, I showed you this book and the Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. If you can see it there, that's a picture of Janus. Okay, you see the 2-headed god. All right, so it says in Roman mythology, Janus was a god who had 2 faces that looked in opposite directions. One face looked into the past and the other looked into the future. Janus served as the god of gates and doors and entrances and exits. His name comes from the Latin word Janua, meaning gate. The Romans prayed to Janus at the beginning and end of any important action, especially a war. So they worshiping this guy. So that's where the name January comes from. And it says the doors to Janus's temple in Rome always remain open in wartime. They were closed only during the rare periods when Rome was at peace, which they never were hardly at peace, kind of like this country. The Romans called on Janus at the beginning of every prayer, even ahead of Jupiter, the king of the gods. January, the first month of the year, was named for Janus. Okay? And then you see this same type of god in different cultures. The Hindus had a 2-faced god called Vaya. Okay, and they prayed to him before any undertaking. So let's see here. Let's go back to this. It says on page 21, the Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays, the month January was named in honor of Janus, the god of new beginnings, gates, and doors in early Rome prior to the use of statues to represent their gods. The Romans worshipped Janus as a doorway. This is similar to how Vesta was considered naught else but living fire. Representations of Janus had 2 faces, one looking forward to the future and the other gazing backwards into the past. To Caesar, it was appropriate. Now listen to this, because this is how you get January 1st. To Caesar, it was appropriate for the new year to be in this month because it would be the doorway to the new year. In honor of Janus, Romans engaged in banqueting and what else? And licentious sexual activities. Kind of like what's going to be going on at the club tonight or at 12:01. Right? Everybody going out, they going to get drunk, and what they going to do? They're going to fornicate. That's what's going on right now. Well, and you can say, well, I'm going to the church. I'm going to deal with my God on that day. Well, who is your God? Because the true and living God said Abib was the month, the first month unto you. You can't worship God any kind of way you want to. You in a church, you're in a place of worship, dealing with God, but God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Again, we have to do away, and we can't figure out why our condition is what it is. We can't figure out, like my father did a lesson earlier today talking about knowledge, right? Talking about faith, and he was talking about Israel, he talking about how, man, we are in this terrible state, and our condition is shown through the scriptures. Right? Because we refuse to be obedient unto God. And we continue this disobedience with this false worship. We are following people. He said, the Lord told his people, he said, you're going to worship these gods who are no gods. I'm going to provoke you to jealousy with a people who are no people. This came from the Romans, who are no people. These Italians, listen, we are the only people God manifested himself unto. Why are we following other people spiritually? It should not be taking place. They don't know anything. Why? Because it was not given unto them. It wasn't given unto them. They're not God's chosen people. So why should we be following these heathen? And heathen just means you don't know God. Why should we be following a heathen? Why should we be worshiping on a day that's dedicated to Janus, in a month that's dedicated to Janus, the God of new beginnings? That's where you get this from. But we never question. We never question. I'm going to skip down a little bit. On page 23, it says, in their usual manner of attempting to make holy that which is vile, the Roman Catholic Church, up until 1969, maintained that January 1st was the day that Jesus was circumcised. So they try to lie and say, well, we're going to keep this day because he was born on December 25th, and then he was circumcised on January 1st. Man, they some liars. Let me read this to you real quick. I want to read something in Revelation real quick. That's so disgusting how they have taken everything, and that's pagan and vile and an abomination unto God, and put his name on it. This is Revelation, the 17th chapter. Because concerning this church, this institution, it says in verse 1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying, come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So you got this great whore or a prostitute. Now this is spiritually speaking, right? It's sitting upon many waters. What are the waters? Verse 15, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth. So where this whore is sitting at, it said these waters are people and multitudes and nations and tongues. So that's what these waters are referring to. All the people. So up out of human beings, basically, emerges this institution, this church, this lady, but not a lady, a whore. Okay, a whore, a spiritual whore. That's what she is. And this is what she's done. Verse 2, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. What kind of fornication? Like the fornication they going out to deal with physically? No, the fornication that spiritually got you in church thinking you dealing with God. Right? Got you thinking that Jesus was the Messiah was born on December 25th. Right? So that's their birthday, the S-U-N. The Catholic Church said, no, we're going to make it the birthday of the S-O-N. But he wasn't born on that day. And like I said, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's just like they the ones saying, hey, the day of the Lord is on Sunday. Why? Because pagans had that day of the Lord, when the day of the Lord is referring to a whole time period. It's not talking about Sunday. That's talking about when the Lord is going to intervene in the affairs of man. That's what the day of the Lord is talking about. But the day of their Lord was the Sunday. That's why they got that day of worship. See, man, that is total deception. But the Bible warns you to beware of deception. Jesus even warns you to beware of deception. For many shall come in my name saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. But it says something about this whore. It says, in whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, spiritually fornicating. And the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of a fornication. Physically drunk? No, it's talking about spiritually you have been made drunk with this false doctrine. You've partaken of this false doctrine. So now you think Jesus was born on December 25th. You think he died on Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. You think now because of that, you're supposed to keep Sunday holy. That's totally contrary. Or you think the Pope is righteous in some capacity. That's all deception. What all the Catholic Universal Church did is deal with all that paganism that people are already dealing with amongst these heathen nations and just stamp the name of Jesus on all those customs. That's why you always see a baby. That's why you always say they venerate sun worship. You look at it, all their symbols is all about sun worship. It's all about that old worship. You look at, like when you look at some of their pictures, the so-called Madonna and the Queen of Heaven. That's an old term. You can go all the way back to Babylon to see that. Or you see the baby. That baby is not Jesus. That baby is Tammuz. And when you peel back that layer, you know what you see? Straight up Luciferianism. You see straight up Satanism in that institution. But he says something. It says something about this this woman. And the verse 4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So she's rich. Look at all of the Catholic Church is stolen. Totally rich. Totally rich. And have indoctrinated the nations by the sword. Get down and worship or die. That's how they do it. Colonize. You don't have a transatlantic slave trade unless you have the blessings of the Roman Catholic Church. And it says something about this whore. It says in verse 5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. What does it mean, Mystery Babylon? Because the spiritual system that was established in the beginning, because all roads as far as spiritual lead to Babylon. That's where it all began. That's where it all began. You have secular and religious texts telling you that. It all began in Babylon. And they are continuing that old system of Babylonian worship under the guise of Christ and so-called Christianity. Today's Christianity is garbage. Yes, I'm being very forward and I'm just telling you how it is. It's straight trash. When you peel back the layers, nothing had nothing to do with the true and living God. Had nothing to do with the Bible. That's why none of it lines up with the Bible. That's why your minister has to lie. He has to lie to you. He has to twist and concoct the scriptures like the minister of Satan he is, or even today she is, to get you, and then just call it Christianity. So you're doing all this paganism, all this lawlessness is done under Christianity. So it says the mother of harlots. So this is a mother whore. What does it mean? Because all these Christian denominations come out of who? Come out of Catholicism. Baptists, Episcopalians, Lutherans, all these hundreds of denominations are all little whores. The mother whore is in Rome. Let's skip down to verse 9. Because it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 hairs are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Now, what place is on 7 mountains? We know it's Rome. And what's in Rome? That whore is in Rome, Vatican City, right? The Roman Catholic Church, that institution, that whore is there. So it's just also to let you know who it is. It says, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. They have killed so many, and they will kill many again in the future. See, you really, they don't have the power right now to force, but they will at the time, they will force you to worship. And they tell you, hey, I give you an example of this. Ratzinger, Benedict, who came before Frankie or Francis. He was the head of the office that was formerly known as the Office of the Inquisition. I challenge you to look up some of the torture instruments that they had during the Inquisition. Matter of fact, I might just, next time I come before you, I might just show you that. If I remember, maybe I'll write it down. But yeah, that wasn't like you had a choice to serve the true and living God. They have all this legislation talking about if you're going to keep the Sabbath day. I'm talking about back in the old days. They had this, listen, you couldn't keep the Sabbath. Were you a sabotager? Let him be anathema, meaning kicked out of the church. Kept from salvation, as if salvation comes from Catholicism. Again, Catholicism is garbage. Today's Christianity is a bunch of trash. It's not of God at all. Nominal only. So let me see if I want to read something else in here. I'm going to go back to page 23 in this book, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. In their usual manner of attempting to make holy that which is vile, the Roman Catholic Church up until 1969 maintained that January 1st was the day that Jesus was circumcised. Bunch of lies. So he's supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day. So they said, yeah, he was circumcised on January 1st. They knew that was a lie when they said it. They knew it was a lie when they said it. Because they're a bunch of liars. So it said the Eastern Orthodox Church still holds the position that Jesus was circumcised on the first day of January. They keep it to it. But how could he be circumcised on January 1st when he wasn't born on December 25th? But even if he was born on December 25th, which he was not, why should you be observing his birthday when that's not commanded? When the feast days you read about in Leviticus 23, where he tells you, these are my feasts. Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, he says in verse 2, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. And he starts with the Sabbath day, which you do away with. And then he goes to the Passover, which you don't deal with, the feast of unleavened bread, which you discarded, and so on and so on. If he was born on December 25th, you can never read where it tells you to observe that day. You can't justify that. And then, let alone, even if he was circumcised on the first day, where do you read that you're supposed to be shooting up in the air and having some fireworks or commemorating that day in any way, shape, or form? Because we know he was circumcised on the 8th day. It's just one January 1st. And you can't read anywhere from Genesis to Revelation that you're supposed to be observing that day in some form of capacity. See, this is all a bunch of lies. So should believers observe New Year's Day, January 1st? Obviously not. I want to thank you for your time.